So we know that the Renaissance started in Italy in the 14th century. By the 15th century, it had spread beyond Italy to other parts of Europe, and we want to understand why and how it spread north and became a second part of the Renaissance, the Northern Renaissance. One thing to understand about Italy during the Renaissance is that there was no unified Italian state. That's not to say there was no kingdom of Italy. Instead, you had a whole bunch of tiny, separate, independent republics and city-states that were kind of constantly fighting one another. Florence, Siena, even the Papal States, the Pope's territory, as well as Venice, Milan. These were constantly fighting, if not each other, fighting off control from other monarchs in, say, France or the Holy Roman Empire. So that political situation made Italy kind of a complicated place to live. But because it was sort of this center of both learning and art, you had lots of people willing to come to Italy. So one way Renaissance ideas spread was by artists from other parts of Europe headed to Italy and taking those ideas and bringing them back to their home countries. Another way was actually through that instability we talked about. In the 15th century, King Francis I of France decided to invade northern Italy, trying to take some of its territory from Savoy and Milan. And this, combined with the other kind of conflict you saw in Italy, made it kind of a difficult place to stay. And as the wealth of monarchs in northern Europe, like France, Spain, parts of Germany, or was then the Holy Roman Empire, even as far away as England, as it was well known in Italy that those people had lots of money and were interested in the arts that were being produced in Italy, a lot of artists left Italy for other parts of Europe. And they brought with them those ideas and either worked for monarchs or opened up schools in those places. Even Leonardo da Vinci famously went to France, became a court painter for Francis, and Francis liked to sort of brag that he was the last one to see Da Vinci alive because Da Vinci died in Paris. So you had sort of this love of this Italian Renaissance art beyond Italy. And another kind of key way this spread was through the printing press. In 1439, a German man named Johann Gutenberg invented, or adapted, we should probably say, the movable type printing press. Now, printing wasn't unknown before. People would take blocks of wood or metal and carve things into them so they could print and mass produce images and text that way. But that meant for every book you'd have to make a whole new plate of text. So you imagine for the book of any size, you're making a whole lot of plates, and production was pretty slow. But he had made what's called the movable type printing press. Now, we've already seen this in China during the Tang Dynasty. But the way this works is each letter had its own individual stamp, and you put this into a block and press it down onto paper, and then you move the letters around as you need to. And this really was very revolutionary. It led to a printing revolution in Europe, where books used to take, up to 6 months or a year to copy by hand. Now you could produce in that same amount of time about 500 books. So suddenly, and along with the introduction of paper too, which came from the Silk Road trade, remember China invented that as well, came to the Arab world and then eventually to Europe. So with that, sort of the dual influence of paper and the movable type printing press, all of a sudden texts are much easier to mass produce. So those famous pieces of literature we saw out of Italy, whether it be Cicero's Ancient Writings or Machiavelli's The Prince or any of these other writers, now you can get those things well outside of Italy and they become much cheaper. Now, one thing to keep in mind is sometimes this gets sort of confused is this doesn't mean suddenly everyone in Europe can read. Literacy rates are still relatively low. But now that there's more books, you will gradually see the rate of literacy rise. And very importantly for this time, the ideas of the Italian ideas from the Renaissance spread beyond Italy.